Let's get back to my favorite story. My favorite congressman, George Santos. Maybe that's his name, maybe not. I've been saying that for a while, but now we actually have video of him introducing himself, not as George Santos, but as Anthony DeVolder. Let's take a listen.
So my name is Anthony DeVolder. I'm a New York City resident. I've recently founded a group called United for Trump, so if you guys want to follow, that would be awesome. How do you think that as a trans woman and a conservative, you can help educate other trans people from not having to follow the narrative that the media and the Democrats put?
Who is this man? Who are you? So I mean, here's the other question. Isn't Anthony DeVolder, I later was reading, he appears to be what? That name was then linked to one of his phony businesses that he was involved in. But it's also the question, like, who, also, there's actually another clip from 2020 where a GOP official introduces him and it's like, oh, George Santos. He goes, I know him as Anthony DeVolder, but I guess he's George Santos. It's like, who are you? Like, who have you been representing yourself as? Like, everything about this man, it's insanity.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it was any one of these pieces, you might be able to go, all right.
Right.
But
no, you can't say all
like
right.
every part of his identity, including his name, is just like up for grabs, depending on how he wants to present himself on that particular day. Also, I think the organization he references there, like, oh, I started United for Trump or whatever. No, you didn't.
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Okay, I got another one for you though, because this one was also really hilarious to me. So it came out when those Republican officials in New York did their press conference and were like, you know, calling on him to resign and just really going in on him. One of the guys who was speaking was talking about, like, I expressed some interest in sport, and he held out to me that he was like a championship volleyball player at a college he didn't even ultimately go to. So someone unearthed a clip of him on a radio interview, I think this is, with a similar line about how he was this great championship volleyball player. Of course, all of this also completely fabricated. Take a listen.
You know, it's funny. I actually went to school on a volleyball scholarship.
You did?
And I did, yeah. When I was in Baruch, we were the #1 volleyball
Did you graduate
team.
from Baruch? Did you graduate from there?
Yeah.
So did I.
I did.
So did I.
Oh, very cool. We went to play against Harvard, Yale, and we slay them. We slay them. We were champions across the entire Northeast corridor. Every school that came up against us, they were shaking at the time. Look, I sacrificed both my knees and got very nice knee replacements from HSS. Playing volleyball. That's how serious I took the game.
Amazing.
Yeah, wow.
It's just amazing. And it's also
total lies.
So, I mean, just invented out of whole cloth. And
the knees, the drama.
The consistent theme here is whoever is in front of him at that moment, he's telling them whatever he thinks they want to hear. There's another part of that interview where the dude's like, this is so crazy. The two sports you're into are the same two sports I'm into. It's like, oh, we both went to the same college. That's so crazy. It's like, no, he's just telling you exactly what he thinks you want to hear. That's what he did with Republican donors. That's what he did with the voters. That's what he did with seemingly every single person that he encountered throughout this whole saga. More seriously, beyond the like silly volleyball lies, is we're getting maybe a bit more of a clear picture into how exactly he obtained the cash that he fronted in his own campaign. Remember, $700,000 that he personally contributed to his campaign when no one really knows. How did you get that money when you were just getting not foreclosed on, you were just getting evicted from your apartments? You were just reporting that you have very low income. You're seemingly struggling. Apparently, like, stole his roommate's scarf and other designer clothes. Anyway, it looks like he was involved with this, what the SEC says was a blatant Ponzi scheme. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. George Santos raised money for a company the SEC says was a Ponzi scheme. He persuaded, they found at least one person to make a six-figure investment in a, of course, Florida-based company that they have now said was a Ponzi scheme. Mr. Santos was hired in 2020 to raise capital for the company. Harbor City Capital landed at least one significant investment from a wealthy investor. When the investment failed to deliver on the promised returns, according to one of the people, Mr. Santos sought to reassure the investor by saying he had personally raised nearly $100 million and had invested his own family's money in Harbor City. Of course, none of that is true. But the fact that he was associated with this Ponzi scheme where basically, the dude who started this, last name is, I think his name's like JP Maroney. I read the whole SEC complaint because I'm like obsessed with this. Not only Santos, but I'm like obsessed with frauds and schemes right now. Apparently what they would do is they would tell people they had this ability to, at low cost, generate all these sales leads. So their cost per generating the sales lead was $1, and that they could then sell them to other companies for $5. Well, that was all, it appears, pretty much made up. Maroney and his associates, including Santos, all in, were able to raise like $17.1 million. Something like $4 million of that went directly into Maroney's pockets. Some of it went into his wife's pockets. Some of it went into companies that he held, and other, paid off his credit card debt, bought him a waterfront home that, by the way, they hosted a Trump fundraiser at, with Don Jr. appearing and Kimberly Guilfoyle. And they then would use some of the proceeds to pay off some of the new proceeds to pay off the original investors, which is what ultimately makes it a Ponzi scheme. There's also in some of the reporting that, that Santos was notified. Some of the investors were like, dude, this is all fake and fraudulent. One of the things they would advertise is like, oh, this is all safe because we have this sort of like line of credit backup thing at a major bank, and here's the bank. I think it was Deutsche Bank. And he was notified of the fact that that was all fake. So there's some indication that he knew there was something going on. Of course, he says that he had no idea that there was anything inappropriate
it's just
happening
straight
here.
fraud. And actually, if you read even more, he, by raising money from investors and paid in a form, he had to be a registered broker with the SEC, and he's not a registered broker. So he actually might be even guilty of straight fraud here,
and none of this was included on his mandatory financial disclosures.
Right.
He ceased, it looks like the timing is that he stopped working with Harbor City like a month before he filed for to run for Congress. And that's when he sets up his DeVolder company and some of the people that he went into business with also came from the Harbor City Ponzi scheme. So one possibility that's being floated is that he, had ill-gotten gains from this Harbor City Capital thing that he uses then and sort of launders through this DeVolder organization and then ends up putting some of that money into his campaign. That's speculative. We don't know exactly the trail of money, but that's a little bit of what it is looking like. Let's go ahead to the next piece that we have here. Ultimately, go ahead and throw this up on the screen. So New York Times has some reporting that apparently these lies and, outright fabrications were in fact known to some Republicans, at least. Hard to say exactly who. They said George Santos inspired no shortage of suspicion during his 2022 campaign, including the upper echelons of his own party, yet many Republicans looked the other way. And effectively what happened here, Saagar, is when you run for Congress, not only does your opponent do opposition research on you, it's also very common that you basically pay for opposition research on yourself.
Yes, that's right.
To see what the other side is going to turn up and potentially use against you. So he authorized with his original campaign team, he's like, all right, let's go ahead and do that. And he authorized the spending to go ahead and research what they could use against him. And it turned up, not everything, but it turned up some of the significant lies that he was telling about his resume, about his schooling, et cetera, and relatively easily. And his staff basically came to him and his consultants and were like, dude, you got to drop out. And, now's the time before this all comes out and you're humiliated and your life is destroyed. And he, took some time and thought about it. And he was like, no. And he also told them like, oh, I'll produce the degree I got and whatever. Of course, there is no degree. So he definitely didn't do that. And his campaign staff, much of them resigned. The person who seems to have been key to resuscitating him and keeping him alive in terms of the Republican primary and finding him new consultants is people around Elise Stefanik. Were able to get him new consultants, and he didn't come clean to them, apparently, about all of the mistruths and all of the things that had been turned up in the previous opposition research. And then you also had this dynamic on the Democratic side where he ran twice. The first time he lost against this incumbent, and the incumbent just basically decided like, it's not worth spending money against this guy. I'm going to beat him anyway. Second time around, cash was tight on the Zimmerman was the Democratic opponent's name. The DCCC did some basic opposition research on him, failed to turn up any of this somehow. I mean, just utter incompetence there. They had some red flags of like, yeah, maybe this is worth looking into, but it would have been expensive for Zimmerman, and he decided to spend the money on ads. Obviously now I'm sure like really regrets not going forward with his own opposition research into Santos. And so just kind of by happenstance, this guy skates through.
I mean, it's just so wild, like, whenever you consider it, because when you read more and more, just the very basics of it should have been able to be unearthed. But look, I've been reading also about Ponzi schemes. I just finished The Wizard of Lies, the Bernie Madoff book, and he has all the classic hallmarks of the fraudster, where Billy McFarland also comes to mind, the Fire Festival guy, like, that ability to just slip into the, I went to Baruch and established rapport and be like, oh, well, I also, I shredded my, just the level of detail. It's one of those where somebody said, the criminal can always have like a bigger imagination than people, because no one would ever conceive that a guy who's running for the United States Congress, like out there with the whole world, looking upon you, would ever say anything like this without being caught. So his like ability to just con so many people up and down the chain, he actually is a perfect person to raise money for a Ponzi scheme.
True.
Look at it. I think he's going to be in serious trouble. I think at the very least, think about this. If you're a victim of that Ponzi scheme, given the clawback precedents from the Madoff case, like very clearly they could go after him. He also could easily be guilty of wire fraud if he didn't register or if he transferred ill-gotten gains, and then he could also be guilty of campaign finance fraud if he used ill-gotten gains in order to circumvent or in order to fund a Federal Election Commission run. So overall, I think the feds are going to get him.
I think so too.
I'm sure that there's an investigation underway, right?
I think so too. Right now he's saying he's going to hang in there. He's not going to resign. McCarthy isn't pressuring him to resign, even though a lot of New York Republicans ultimately are. But I agree with you. I think this ends with him in prison.
Yeah.
There's just too much here, too many potential crimes. The campaign finance stuff is funny because our campaign finance laws in some ways are so lax. You can drive a Mack truck through the loopholes. If you know how to do it in a sophisticated way, then you can basically get away with almost anything. But if you don't know how to do it in a sophisticated way and you stumble over one of the many, many tripwires, they can and will throw the book at you.
Yes.
And he did not do this in a sophisticated way. There are a million red flags here that they're already picking up on, multiple investigations. So to me, that seems like the clearest path to him ending up behind bars ultimately. And I just, I'm fixated on this, not even from the political perspective, although it is amazing. One of the meta stories that is kind of fascinating is the way both the Republican parties and the Democratic parties and the media establishment all just completely, crumbled and fell down on their job on the most basic level of vetting of this dude. So I think that's an interesting storyline, but the psychology of it, I just can't wrap my head around it. And then I ask myself, like, how many people are there like this out there?
I think a lot.
Right? Who will just invent an entire biography and narrative, and not like as a joke at a bar, but as to lean into for their whole life story. It's wild. It's wild to me. And this guy was so brazen and also so sloppy that it was easy to catch him. But I'm sure there are a lot more sophisticated con men and women out there who ultimately get away with it and probably end up with a lot of riches and power. So
there's a lot of people. Like,
that's the part that fascinates me.
Hilaria Baldwin, that whole thing. I mean, there's so many of these where you're just like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? You literally have a fake Spanish accent. Remember that clip when she's like, what's the word in English? I'm like, you literally aren't even Spanish. Like, what are you doing? This is craziness. But look, it's a mind disease that affects people seemingly all at the very top. And I think there's a lot of people out there. I was watching this interesting interview on the Soft White Underbelly channel of a con man. And like, when you get inside the mind of these guys, they're vicious. Just the way they'll rip you off. The rules don't apply to them. And what really comes across also is that even in the interview, you can't help but like the guy. The whole time, like, he's got something to him.
What he's got.
He's like one of the biggest fraudsters in modern American history. It's like, wow. Anyway, so Santos, I think he's going down.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.